The movie starts with George and his family relocating to a new home. The condition of the house was terrible. There was a lack of electricity, and they didn't have enough food to satisfy their hunger, yet their mother instructed them to be thankful to God. However, George doubted his mother's words as he fell asleep. Alan advises George not to hit anyone on his first day at school since he tends to be nervous. On the following day, he arrives at school, and everyone stares at him because of how he looks in class. When he attempted to respond to the teacher's question, she refused to allow him to speak. During lunch, he sat alone with no food to eat while the others were enjoying their meals. One of the students bullies George, which fuels his anger, leading him to retaliate physically. When the teacher arrived, he fled the scene. Years later, we find him and his friend loitering outside a bar. They decided to follow a drunk man who came out, intending to rob him. Surprisingly, the man turned out to be a policeman, and it was a setup for them. A police car shows up, and they pursue George, who manages to hide in the sewer pipes. The police trace him to his hiding spot, accompanied by a police dog. To avoid detection, he covers himself with sewage. As a result, the police do not manage to find him. While heading home, George notices a place offering free food and drinks. In this place, individuals' talents are identified and nurtured, while they work in exchange. He returns to his mother, sharing his discovery and expressing his desire to go to that place. She supports him and encourages him to pursue this opportunity. The next day, he arrives at the institution and receives the official uniform. The guard explains the rules of the establishment to him. Upon entering a room, he spots the new shoes his mother purchased for him. One of the residents, named March, was playing music, which annoyed George, prompting him to turn it off. When lunch arrives, he is taken aback to discover that his shoes have gone missing, as they have been stolen. In the dining hall, he spots the thief wearing his shoes. Filled with rage, he chases after the thief. However, the thief locks himself in a room. George breaks down the door and confronts him, nearly throwing him out of the window. But Duck steps in and separates them. George is shocked to see the door has been damaged. Duck takes him along in his car, recognizing from his file that George had previously been involved in 3 fights and thus is rejected. Duck offers him money for a ticket, but George pleads earnestly, expressing that this institution is his last chance and he cannot go home in defeat. Doc already shows empathy for him and brings him back to the facility. He mentions that he has observed his strength and invites him to join the club, revealing that Doc is the coach. He accepts the invitation and steps into the gym, where he faces off against one of the members, but doesn't succeed. The others begin to mock him, yet Doc continues to support and guide him. However, George becomes frustrated and exits to hit a punching bag, knocking it down and surprising everyone with his power. Doc trains him at the gym and encourages him enthusiastically. He calls his mother to share the news about his entry into the world of boxing. She urges him to avoid fighting. He reassures her that it is merely a sport with established rules. Soon after, he confronts the individual he met previously, strikes him, and knocks him down. Doc is impressed by George's display of skill. George approaches Doc and expresses his desire to compete in matches. Doc advises him that he is still a novice in boxing and needs further training. He inquires about the earliest date for the tournament, and Doc informs him that it will take place in a year, explaining that he won't be eligible to participate due to needing more training. A year later, we see George competing in the tournament against a formidable Russian boxer. His family watches him on television, filled with pride. As the fight commences, the crowd cheers for George. After landing multiple blows on his opponent, he secures an easy victory and wins the gold medal. Filled with happiness, he raises the American flag. His family, astounded, witnesses their brother winning his first gold medal at just 19 years old. The following day, he wears his gold medal while meeting his friends. They question why he displayed the American flag, despite its history of violence against black individuals. Growing upset, he heads back to his mother, who helps soothe him. He informs her of his plans to compete in a tournament at the airport. A captivating girl catches his eye, prompting him to approach her. Her name is Paula. He successfully obtains her phone number. Next, he is seen with Doc, who introduces him to professional trainers. He is acquainted with Sadler and Coach Moore. As George observes Sonny, a black belt, training with him, he joins in. He begins his training and later calls Paula, and they get to know each other, eventually falling in love. George participates in several matches that qualify him for the tournament. He wins all his bouts with ease and grows increasingly popular. Eventually, he decides to propose to Paula. In the end, he reaches the final match. where he will compete against a professional boxer who had previously defeated Muhammad Ali 2 years earlier, and he was anticipated to easily defeat George. The crowd was chanting the name of his opponent. As the fight began between the two, he recalled his coach's advice. He took an unexpected hit from his rival, but he retaliated and landed a punch that knocked him down. Everyone was astonished by George's power. When the second round started, George took charge and delivered several punches. He then struck him again, bringing him to the mat. Truly, George rightfully earned the championship title. Duke felt very pleased knowing that this individual would one day become a hero. He gained fame. George decided to partner with Arch as his manager because of his mathematical skills. The two reached an agreement. George watched the news in which boxer Muhammad Ali ridiculed him. He told the announcer that he would face George someday and claim victory. George moved his family into a large house, and they celebrated his achievements. He had a child, but he neglected his wife. His sister Mary informed him that she was pregnant. Tensions arose between him and his wife due to the fans, leaving her upset about his changes afterward. He traveled to compete in a major tournament against Muhammad Ali. Everyone was eagerly anticipating his performance. He noticed Muhammad Ali mocking him before the crowd, yet George chose to remain silent. Many believed that George would triumph over Muhammad Ali due to his strength. During the match, he opted to fight in his unique style, without relying on his coaches. The fight commenced with him taking control. But soon, he lost focus, swayed by his ego and arrogance. Muhammad Ali took command of the fight. Dark was frustrated with George for fighting unfocused and throwing punches haphazardly. In the end, Muhammad Ali emerged victorious. Everyone was left in disbelief. He communicated with his family afterward. However, his wife revealed that she wanted a divorce. Later, he met with his mother, who questioned him about his earlier actions. He explained that he believed he was the cause of his defeat, holding her responsible for his failure. One day, he resolved to fight 5 boxers to demonstrate his strength to everyone. Muhammad Ali was also present among them. As usual, he mocked George, who challenged him to a rematch. But Muhammad Ali stated that he doesn't fight individuals who lose. Then, we see him with Doc, learning that he had lost. Doc offered him advice to help him regain his former self. A message came through, prompting him to rush to the hospital because his sister Mary was in labor, but the baby's life was at risk. His mother urges them to pray to God. He goes outside and prays extensively, expressing his sorrow to God. He tells God that if someone must die, it should be him instead of his sister's son. After a brief moment, we see Mary with her son, and they are both healthy. The doctors were shocked by the baby's survival. She mentioned that she was aware he had called on God and that God had responded. As days went by, he was in a match against his opponent but lacked concentration. People were saying that George hasn't been the same since losing to Muhammad Ali. Indeed, he lost the fight. Doc was unsure how to handle his situation. He was extremely angry and asked them to be quiet before he passed out. He nearly died but managed to survive. Doc informed him they thought he had passed away. Feeling a renewed sense of faith, he visited the church and shared his experience. He told the congregation that they should believe in God's existence. He made the decision to retire from boxing and dedicate his life to God and the church, aiming to become a priest. When he stepped out of the church and informed Doc of his retirement, Doc was in disbelief. He attempted to persuade him to return to boxing, but he remained firm in his decision. Then he goes to Muhammad Ali, and they turn over a new leaf and become friends. Following that, he approaches his wife to apologize. She accepts his apology but declines to return to him at the church. He then met a girl and fell in love with her. He grabs the microphone and stands before the congregation, offering them advice. Later, he meets Jenny and has a conversation with her. He takes her to an old, closed church. He decides to reopen the church. 10 years later, he became a pastor at the church and guided others. A mother asks him to train her son in boxing, but he turns her down. Then we see him with his wife Jenny and their kids. He later sees the news about the boy whose mother sought his help to teach him boxing and who was accused of stealing. He regretted not agreeing to coach the boy, which prompted him to spend hours reopening an old gym. Irish seemed a little anxious, and something felt off. He renovated the gym and invested a significant amount of money until young people started to come and train. Suddenly, the power goes out, revealing they hadn't paid the bill. He heads to the bank, only to find out his account balance is empty. If he doesn't pay the debt, The sports club will shut down. All of this was due to Irish, who had betrayed him and gambled away the money. He approaches him and strikes him, but then walks away. He opted to create ads to save money for the gym, but his wife informs him that they haven't even reached half of the goal. He felt compelled to return to boxing. Even though Jenny was opposed to the idea, he managed to persuade her. He visits Doc and expresses his desire to go back to boxing. Doc explains that it would be challenging to return due to his age and weight, but he was resolute. He requested that Doc help him lose weight and to come back for training. He begins to work out every day without fail, and he successfully reaches his target weight. He then meets with Doc, who coaches him. He enters a match, and to everyone's surprise, he emerges victorious. The media is buzzing about it, and it's being featured on television shows. Then the Golden Belt Championship unfolds. He did not win, but in spite of his defeat, the crowd rallied behind him. He visits the bank, where he is able to secure a good amount of money from the advertisements and matches, allowing him to settle his debts. Then he competes in another match against a younger champion, but thanks to his experience, he defeats him with a decisive blow. Everyone was amazed by George's achievement, as he became the boxing champion, regardless of his age.